The sun was setting over the rolling hills of the small town where Emma had grown up, casting long shadows across the room as she sat at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on her stomach, feeling the faint flutter of life within, an undeniable confirmation that everything had changed forever. Across from her, her mother stirred a pot of soup with mechanical precision, humming softly to herself, unaware of the storm brewing in her daughter's heart. Emma stared at the steaming mug of tea before her, its warmth doing little to soothe the cold knot of dread tightening in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, but now that it was here, words seemed impossibly distant, like echoes trapped in another dimension. The weight of what she needed to say pressed down on her shoulders, making each breath feel heavier than the last. Her gaze flickered to the family photo hanging on the wall, a snapshot taken years ago when life felt simpler and more predictable. In it, her parents stood smiling proudly, their arms wrapped around a much younger Emma who grinned back at the camera with unbridled innocence. How could she shatter that image? How could she explain something so monumental without destroying the foundation of trust and love they had built together? As the clock ticked steadily onward, marking seconds that felt like hours, Emma's resolve wavered. Doubts swirled through her mind. Would her mother understand? Could anyone truly comprehend the magnitude of what she was about to reveal? Yet deep inside, she knew there was no turning back. This truth didn't belong only to her anymore. It belonged to the tiny being growing within her, waiting to be acknowledged by the world. Taking a deep breath, Emma finally opened her mouth, only for the sound of her phone buzzing loudly against the wooden table to interrupt her thoughts. Startled, she glanced down at the screen, recognizing the caller ID immediately. It wasn't just any call. It was him. Her heart raced faster as conflicting emotions surged through her veins. Should she answer? Did she have time for this distraction right now? Her mother paused mid-stir, glancing curiously toward the vibrating phone. "Aren't you going to get that?" she asked gently, her voice tinged with concern. Emma hesitated, torn between two worlds colliding within her. One rooted firmly in reality, shaped by family expectations and societal norms. The other spiraling into realms unknown, filled with secrets too extraordinary to fathom. With trembling fingers, she reached out and silenced the call, pushing the device aside. There would be time for explanations later, but not now. Not until she faced the first hurdle standing between her and freedom. Summoning every ounce of courage left within her, Emma looked directly into her mother's eyes, searching for the strength she desperately needed. "Mom," she began, her voice barely above a whisper yet charged with an intensity that made time itself seem to pause. "There's something I need to tell you." Her mother turned off the stove, her movements slow and deliberate, as though sensing the gravity of the moment. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from Emma, her expression soft but expectant. For a fleeting second, Emma wished she could retreat into the simplicity of childhood, where problems were solved with hugs and bedtime stories. But those days were gone, replaced by the stark reality of adulthood and all its complexities. "I'm pregnant," Emma said finally, the words tumbling out in a rush before she lost her nerve entirely. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating, filling the space between them like a thick fog. Her mother blinked once, then twice, her face unreadable as shock settled over her features. The ticking of the clock became deafening, each second stretching endlessly as Emma waited for some kind of reaction. Anger, disappointment, disbelief, anything to break the unbearable stillness. But instead of speaking, her mother simply stared, her lips parted slightly as if trying to form words but unable to find them. Emma felt her own throat tighten, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She had imagined countless scenarios during her endless rehearsals, but none prepared her for this hollow silence. Desperation clawed at her insides, urging her to fill the void with more words, to explain, to justify. But how could she begin to articulate something so incomprehensible? "I know this is unexpected," Emma stammered, her voice cracking under the strain. "And I don't expect you to understand right away, but—" Her mother raised a hand abruptly, cutting her off mid-sentence. The gesture wasn't harsh, but it carried an unmistakable weight, silencing Emma instantly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, her mother exhaled deeply, her shoulders slumping ever so slightly as reality began to sink in. "Pregnant," she repeated softly, almost to herself, as though testing the word on her tongue. Then, without warning, she stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Emma watched her helplessly, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this rejection? Disappointment? Or was her mother simply processing, trying to make sense of the bombshell that had just been dropped? She wanted to follow, to reach out and bridge the widening chasm between them, but fear rooted her to the spot. Instead, she sat frozen, clutching the edge of the table as though it might anchor her to sanity amidst the chaos swirling inside her. After several agonizing moments, her mother finally spoke, her voice low and measured. How did this happen? It wasn't an accusation exactly, but the question hung heavily in the air, weighted with implications Emma wasn't sure she was ready to confront. It's complicated, Emma replied cautiously, choosing her words carefully. More complicated than you can imagine. Her mother turned slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied her daughter's face. Complicated how? She pressed, her tone sharper now, tinged with suspicion. You're carrying a child, Emma. That doesn't just happen overnight, or accidentally. Who's the father? Emma flinched at the question, her stomach twisting painfully. This was the part she had dreaded most. The part where she would have to reveal the truth not just about the pregnancy, but about everything else that came with it. Everything she had kept hidden for so long. There isn't one, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her mother frowned, confusion knitting her brow. What do you mean, there isn't one? You're saying this baby has no father? That's impossible. No, Emma corrected quickly, shaking her head. That's not what I meant. What I mean is, she trailed off, struggling to find the right words, knowing full well that nothing she could say would adequately prepare her mother for what was coming next. Her mother crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her patience visibly wearing thin. Then what do you mean, Emma? Because right now, none of this makes any sense. Emma took a shaky breath, bracing herself for the inevitable fallout. The baby isn't human, she blurted out, the confession spilling forth before she could stop it. The room fell silent again, save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. Her mother's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to disbelief, then finally to outright incredulity. What are you talking about? Her mother demanded, her voice rising sharply. This isn't some fairy tale or science fiction story, Emma. You're telling me you're pregnant, with an alien? Is that what you're saying? Emma nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, she admitted, her voice breaking under the weight of the admission. I'm carrying a human-alien hybrid. And before you ask, I didn't plan this. I didn't choose this. It just happened. Her mother stared at her, her face pale and drawn, as though she were looking at a stranger rather than her own flesh and blood. Aliens, she repeated flatly, as if the word itself might lose its absurdity with repetition. You're serious? You actually believe this? I don't just believe it, Mom, Emma shot back, her voice rising despite herself. I know it. Because he told me. He showed me things I can't even begin to explain. Things that go beyond anything we've ever known. And yes, it sounds insane. Believe me, I know how crazy it sounds. But it's true. Her mother sank back into her chair, her hands trembling as she covered her face. Who is he? She asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Where did you meet him? How could you let this happen? Emma hesitated, unsure where to begin. The memories flooded back unbidden, vivid and overwhelming, pulling her into a whirlwind of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to fully process until now. His name, or at least the closest approximation she could manage in human language, was Kalian. She had first encountered him on a crisp autumn night while walking home from work, her footsteps crunching softly against fallen leaves. At first glance, he had seemed ordinary enough, his tall frame draped in a nondescript coat, his features obscured by the dim glow of streetlights. But there was something about him, something otherworldly, that drew her in, like a magnetic pull she couldn't resist. When their eyes met, it was as though time itself stopped. His irises shimmered faintly, shifting colors in a way that defied logic, and for a brief moment, Emma felt as though she were staring into the depths of the universe itself. Before she could speak, he extended a hand toward her, palm upward, revealing intricate patterns etched into his skin that pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. Without thinking, she reached out to touch them, and that was when everything changed. In an instant, she was no longer standing on the sidewalk but floating in a vast expanse of stars, surrounded by constellations that danced like living entities. Kalian stood beside her, his presence both comforting and awe-inspiring, as he explained, in a language that somehow bypassed words altogether, that he hailed from a distant planet whose inhabitants had evolved far beyond humanity's understanding of biology and consciousness. They weren't bound by physical limitations or mortal fears. They existed in harmony with the cosmos, their very essence intertwined with the fabric of the universe. At first, Emma thought she must be dreaming, caught in some elaborate hallucination brought on by exhaustion or stress. But the sensations were too real, too visceral to dismiss. When Kalian touched her forehead with his glowing fingertips, a surge of energy coursed through her body, leaving her breathless and exhilarated. He called it a bonding, a sacred connection forged between two beings destined to create something extraordinary. Something that would bridge the gap between worlds. It wasn't until weeks later, when morning sickness and fatigue became impossible to ignore, that the truth dawned on her: she was pregnant. Not with a purely human child, but with a being born of both Earth and the stars, a miracle unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "His name is Kalian," Emma continued, her voice trembling as she recounted the story to her mother. "He's different, beautiful, powerful, and yes, he's not from here. But he chose me, Mom. He trusted me. And now, because of him, I carry a piece of his world inside me, a gift that transcends everything we thought we knew about life." Her mother listened in stunned silence, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. For every shred of skepticism that lingered in her eyes, there was also a flicker of curiosity, a hint of wonder that refused to be extinguished entirely. "If what you're saying is true," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "then why hasn't anyone else seen him? Why keep this a secret?" Emma swallowed hard, guilt weighing heavily on her shoulders. "Because it's dangerous," she admitted. "Not just for me, but for him, and for the baby. If people found out, they wouldn't understand. They'd try to take it away from us, study it, exploit it. I couldn't let that happen." Her mother leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table with white-knuckled hands. "Do you realize what you're asking me to believe? Do you have any idea how insane this sounds?" "I know," Emma pleaded, reaching out to grasp her mother's hand. "I do. But I swear to you, Mom, I'm not lying. This is real. And whether you believe me or not, I need you to trust me. Please." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Emma's revelation hung suspended in the air, a fragile thread connecting two vastly different realities. Slowly, her mother withdrew her hand, her expression unreadable as she rose from the table and walked to the doorway. "I need time to think," she murmured, her voice hollow. "I need space." And with that, she disappeared into the hallway, leaving Emma alone in the suffocating silence of the kitchen. Days passed in a blur of restless nights and strained conversations. Emma's mother moved through the house like a ghost, her usual warmth replaced by a distant, guarded demeanor that made every interaction feel like walking on eggshells. Meals were eaten in near silence, punctuated only by the clinking of utensils against plates and the occasional forced attempt at small talk that quickly fizzled out. The once vibrant energy of their home had been replaced by a palpable heaviness, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to break. Emma tried repeatedly to bridge the growing chasm between them, but her efforts only seemed to widen the gap. Each time she approached her mother, hoping to offer reassurance or share more details about Kalian and the incredible journey they were embarking upon, she was met with polite disinterest or outright dismissal. "I need time," her mother would say, her tone clipped and final, before retreating to her bedroom or disappearing into the garden for hours on end. The isolation gnawed at Emma, eating away at her resolve like acid. She had always been close to her mother, relying on her wisdom and unwavering support during life's toughest challenges. Now, faced with the most profound experience of her existence, she found herself utterly alone, adrift in a sea of doubt and uncertainty. Nights were the hardest, spent tossing and turning beneath the covers as waves of anxiety crashed over her. What if her mother never accepted the truth? What if she decided Emma was too far gone, too consumed by delusions to remain part of the family? During the day, Emma threw herself into mundane tasks, scrubbing floors and organizing closets with obsessive determination, anything to distract herself from the turmoil raging inside. But no matter how hard she worked, the questions lingered, haunting her every move. Had she made a mistake by telling her mother? Should she have waited longer, given her more time to adjust before dropping such a bombshell? Or was honesty always destined to drive a wedge between them, no matter how carefully she framed the truth? One afternoon, as Emma sat on the couch flipping aimlessly through channels, her phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table. It was Kalian, or rather, the encrypted message system he used to communicate when he couldn't appear in person. Her heart leapt at the sight of his signature symbol flashing on the screen, a swirl of celestial patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Opening the app, she read his words with mounting excitement. They are coming. The message was cryptic, as always, but Emma understood its urgency. Who's coming? She typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. Humans. Aliens. What do you mean? His response arrived moments later, concise yet chilling. Both. Trust no one. Emma stared at the screen, her pulse racing as panic began to creep in. Was this related to her mother's reaction, or lack thereof? Had someone already discovered their secret? She wanted to ask more, to demand clarification, but Kalian's messages rarely lingered long. Within seconds, the app closed automatically, erasing all trace of their conversation. Left alone with her racing thoughts, Emma felt the walls of the house closing in around her, suffocating her with unanswered questions and mounting dread. Desperate for comfort, she ventured tentatively toward her mother's room, knocking softly on the door. "Mom!" she called, her voice barely audible. "Can we talk?" There was no immediate reply, and for a moment, Emma considered giving up, retreating back to the safety of her solitude. But then, faintly, she heard movement from within, followed by the creak of the door opening. Her mother stood there, her eyes red-rimmed and weary, her hair tied back in a loose bun. "What is it?" she asked, her tone softer than it had been in days but still laced with caution. I got a message," Emma stammered, clutching her phone tightly. "From him. He says they're coming. Both humans and aliens. And I don't know what to do." Her mother sighed deeply, running a hand over her face as though trying to ward off exhaustion. "Emma," she began, her voice heavy with resignation, "I don't know what to believe anymore. You've told me things that defy logic, things I can't wrap my head around. But if even half of what you're saying is true, if there really are others involved, people who might hurt you or this baby, then we need to figure out a plan." Emma blinked, startled by the shift in her mother's demeanor. For the first time since the revelation, there was a glimmer of solidarity in her voice, a willingness to entertain the possibility that Emma wasn't entirely lost to madness. "You believe me?" she asked hesitantly, hardly daring to hope. Her mother hesitated, her gaze dropping to Emma's stomach for the briefest moment before meeting her eyes again. "I don't know what I believe," she admitted. "But I know you're my daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it means stepping into the unknown." Relief washed over Emma like a tidal wave, bringing with it a surge of gratitude so intense it nearly brought tears to her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt less alone, as though the fragile thread connecting them had begun to strengthen, however slightly. Together, they sat down at the kitchen table once more, poring over maps and brainstorming contingency plans, their shared purpose forging a tentative bond that neither dared to name aloud. Yet even as they worked side by side, Emma couldn't shake the nagging sensation that danger loomed closer with each passing hour. Somewhere out there, forces were converging, human and alien alike, each driven by motives she couldn't fully comprehend. And somewhere among them was Kalian, watching, waiting, preparing for a confrontation that would change everything. The days blurred together in a haze of preparation and paranoia, each sunrise bringing new uncertainties and heightened tensions. Emma and her mother transformed their quaint family home into a fortress of sorts, reinforcing doors and windows, stockpiling supplies, and devising escape routes should the worst come to pass. Despite the outward semblance of unity, an undercurrent of unease persisted, manifesting in stolen glances and unspoken fears. Emma often found herself pacing the length of the living room late at night, her mind racing with fragmented thoughts and half-formed plans. Her connection to Kalian grew stronger with each passing day, a telepathic link that allowed her glimpses into his world, a realm of shimmering landscapes and sentient energies, where time flowed differently and emotions resonated like musical notes. Yet these visions offered little solace, for they came accompanied by warnings of impending peril. Shadows moved across the stars, whispers of betrayal echoing through the void. Though Kalian remained elusive, his presence was a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Her mother, meanwhile, grappled with her own internal battles. By day, she maintained a stoic facade, channeling her energy into practical tasks and strategic planning. But at night, when the house fell silent and sleep eluded her, she wrestled with doubts that gnawed at her resolve. What if Emma's claims were merely the product of an overactive imagination, fueled by stress or hormonal changes? Could she truly risk everything, their safety, their future, on the slim chance that her daughter's fantastical story held even a kernel of truth? Despite these lingering uncertainties, a fragile alliance had formed between them, bound by necessity rather than certainty. They shared meals in tense silence, exchanging updates on their preparations without delving too deeply into the emotional minefield beneath the surface. Small gestures, a pat on the shoulder, a reassuring smile, became their primary means of communication, conveying volumes in their simplicity. Amidst the chaos, Emma's pregnancy advanced at an astonishing rate, defying conventional timelines and medical understanding. The baby's movements grew increasingly pronounced, accompanied by sensations that defied description, waves of warmth that radiated outward, filling her with a sense of awe and trepidation. She began to dream vividly, her subconscious conjuring images of crystalline cities and luminous beings who regarded her with expressions of reverence and anticipation. These dreams left her breathless upon waking, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and foreboding. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Emma stood at the window, gazing out at the horizon. Her mother joined her, leaning against the frame with a sigh. "Do you ever wonder," her mother began hesitantly, breaking the silence, "what kind of life this child will have? Will it belong here, among us, or somewhere else?" Emma turned to face her, surprise flickering across her features. It was the first time her mother had openly acknowledged the baby's existence beyond logistical concerns. "I don't know," she admitted softly, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. "But I think it's meant to bridge worlds, to bring people together, not divide them." Her mother nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "If that's true, then maybe we're not just fighting for ourselves. Maybe we're fighting for something bigger than either of us can fully understand." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden blare of car engines pulling into the driveway, tires crunching against gravel. Emma's breath hitched as she peered outside, her pulse quickening at the sight of unfamiliar vehicles parked haphazardly in front of the house. Men in dark suits emerged, their movements precise and calculated, while overhead, strange lights flickered in the gathering dusk, too bright, too erratic to be ordinary aircraft. "They're here," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of dread and inevitability. Her mother gripped her arm tightly, grounding her as adrenaline surged through their veins. Together, they moved toward the front door, steeling themselves for whatever awaited beyond. As they stepped onto the porch, the air crackled with an electric charge, the boundary between worlds dissolving before their eyes. Figures materialized from the shadows, their forms shifting and indistinct, exuding an aura of power that sent shivers down Emma's spine. Among them stood Kalian, his luminous presence a beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. "Stay close," he urged, his voice resonating within her mind rather than her ears. "The convergence has begun." As the scene unfolded, alliances were tested, truths revealed, and destinies rewritten. For Emma, the line between protector and protected blurred, thrusting her into a role she had never imagined. The battle ahead promised to challenge every fiber of her being, forcing her to confront not only external threats but also the deepest recesses of her own soul. And as the stars aligned above, casting their ethereal glow upon the unfolding drama, one thing became clear. The choices made in the coming hours would echo across galaxies, shaping the course of history for generations to come. The convergence unfolded with a surreal intensity, as though the fabric of reality itself had been stretched to its limits. Kalian's voice reverberated in Emma's mind, calm yet urgent, guiding her through the chaos swirling around them. The figures that materialized on the porch were a mix of human agents in dark suits and shimmering alien entities whose forms seemed to flicker between solidity and light. Each carried an air of purpose, their intentions veiled but palpable, a storm gathering at the threshold of their home. Emma's mother stepped forward instinctively, positioning herself slightly ahead of Emma as if shielding her from whatever might come next. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the shift taking place within her. Despite her lingering doubts, she had chosen to stand by her daughter, not out of blind faith, but because love demanded no less. "Who are you?" Emma's mother demanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "What do you want with my family?" One of the suited men stepped forward, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "We're here to ensure containment," he said curtly, his tone devoid of emotion. "This situation represents a significant threat to global security. We cannot allow it to escalate further." Before Emma could respond, one of the alien beings moved closer, its form rippling like liquid starlight. Its voice entered their minds simultaneously, bypassing language entirely. "Containment is not your right," it declared, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "The child she carries is sacred, a bridge between worlds. To interfere is to invite catastrophe." Tension crackled in the air as the two factions faced off, their opposing agendas clashing like tectonic plates grinding against one another. Emma felt the weight of their conflict pressing down on her, each side vying for control over something far greater than any of them could comprehend. She glanced at Kalian, seeking reassurance, but his expression was grim, his usual serenity replaced by a quiet resolve. "They won't stop," he warned silently, his thoughts brushing against hers. "Neither will we." Emma turned back to the scene before her, her heart pounding as realization dawned. This wasn't just about protecting herself or her unborn child, it was about choosing sides in a cosmic struggle that transcended borders, species, and even time itself. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. "I'm not afraid of you," she declared aloud, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Her words were directed at everyone present, the humans, the aliens, and even the shadowy forces lurking just beyond sight. "You can try to take this away from me, but you'll fail. Because this baby isn't just mine, it belongs to all of us. To every world, every being who dares to hope for connection instead of division." Her declaration hung in the air, raw and unyielding, challenging those assembled to reconsider their motives. For a fleeting second, there was silence, a pause in which the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the suited man raised a device in his hand, aiming it directly at Emma. Before anyone could react, a burst of energy surged forth, striking her with enough force to send her stumbling backward. Pain seared through her body, sharp and electric, but it was nothing compared to the primal surge of protectiveness that ignited within her. The baby inside her responded instinctively, its presence flaring like a supernova, filling the room with a radiant glow that forced everyone to shield their eyes. Even Kalian staggered under the intensity, his luminous form momentarily dimmed by the brilliance emanating from Emma. When the light finally faded, Emma stood tall, her posture unwavering despite the ache coursing through her veins. The device in the man's hand sparked and sputtered, rendered useless by whatever force now coursed through her. Around her, the alien beings began to hum in unison, their voices blending into a harmonious resonance that resonated deep within her soul. "She has awakened," one of them intoned, its gaze fixed on Emma with unmistakable reverence. "The bond is complete." Kalian stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and the intruders. His eyes blazed with an inner fire as he addressed the assembled crowd. "You have seen the truth," he said, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "To harm her is to harm yourselves. To deny the child's destiny is to deny the very essence of unity that binds us all." For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the suited men exchanged uneasy glances before lowering their weapons. One by one, they retreated to their vehicles, their expressions inscrutable but tinged with unease. The alien beings lingered a moment longer, their forms shimmering faintly as they bowed in silent acknowledgement before vanishing into the ether. As the dust settled, Emma collapsed onto the porch steps, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Her mother rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her trembling frame. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "What just happened?" Emma managed a weak smile, leaning into her mother's embrace. I think I found my strength," she murmured. And maybe ours too. As the dust settled, Emma collapsed onto the porch steps, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Her mother rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her trembling frame. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "What just happened?" Emma managed a weak smile, leaning into her mother's embrace. I think I found my strength," she murmured. "And maybe ours too." Though the immediate danger had passed, the road ahead remained uncertain. The convergence had altered something fundamental, not only within Emma but also within the world itself. Lines had been drawn, alliances forged, and destinies set into motion. Yet amidst the uncertainty, there was hope, a fragile, flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. As night fell, casting the landscape in shadows, Emma gazed up at the stars, their light reflecting in her tear-filled eyes. Somewhere among those distant constellations lay answers, challenges, and perhaps even redemption. Whatever came next, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Not with her mother by her side, not with Kalian watching over her, and certainly not with the extraordinary life growing within her, a beacon of possibility in a universe teetering on the brink of transformation. And so, beneath the vast expanse of the cosmos, Emma embraced the unknown, ready to step boldly into the future, wherever it might lead.